And the member for Cowichan Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to take my place to speak on Bill 18, the Economic Stabilization Act today. This bill amends multiple acts and makes a number of changes that implement COVID-19 response measures. It extends the tax filing and payment deadlines for multiple taxes, creates the BC emergency benefit, and allows budget deficits for the next 3 years. One major piece of this bill amends the Income Tax Act to create the BC emergency benefit for workers. This benefit is a tax-free, one-time $1,000 payment for BC residents whose ability to work has been affected due to COVID-19. This bill also extends the tax return filing and payment deadlines for the carbon tax, the motor fuel tax, tobacco tax, provincial sales tax, and commercial property taxes. As we commented when these measures were announced, these were the right steps to take at the right time. The emergency benefit, along with these tax deferrals, helped businesses and individuals weather the immediate financial crisis from the shutdowns that took place. Going forward, there are two challenges that government needs to balance. On the one hand, government needs to be able to adapt given the substantial uncertainties on the horizon, and ensure that people and businesses are still receiving the supports they need come fall. Otherwise, we risk seeing a substantial wave of bankruptcies and significant financial hardship. On the other hand, government needs to be sending clear signals about the type of economy it wants to see for the future. So for most of these taxes now due to be collected in October, I think it's important to recognize the possibility of a strong second wave in the fall, and that there are many unknowns about the ability of people to pay taxes that have accrued over the past number of months. The carbon tax is unique, however, given how powerfully it is connected to being a signal about the type of industries and types of jobs we want to build. So it is also critically important that as a part of our recovery strategy, government bring back the scheduled carbon tax increases that were suspended a few months ago. It is with some wide dismay that the information around how much subsidies have gone to the oil and gas industry in the past few months in Canada, instead of going to the clean energy and renewable energy industry, is problematic as the signal that we want to be sending. And it's important in BC that we take a leadership role on this. Economists agree that consistent and scheduled increases to the price of carbon are central to its effectiveness as an economic tool. It provides business certainty and spurs investment in the clean economy. There are many innovative businesses in BC that are willing and able to lead the transition to a clean economy and can create huge numbers of clean jobs as they do this. But these businesses have been clear. It undermines potential investments in transitional technology if there is no certainty that the economy is moving in this direction and that it has the full backing of government. So we will continue to urge as strongly as we can for government to let the carbon tax do its job as a price signal to help us transform our economy. The bill also extends the time period for municipalities to remit the school tax and police tax to the province, but it does require municipalities to fulfill their tax remittance obligations to TransLink and BC Transit to give them certainty of cash flow. While the extension in this bill on the school tax and the police tax does provide municipalities with additional fiscal flexibility to deal with COVID-19, the financial situation of municipalities is a serious issue, and something I expect we'll be talking far more about in the House in months to come. Municipalities are facing a significant financial crunch, and they don't have the same fiscal flexibility nor the multiple forms of revenue that the provincial and federal governments have. At committee stage, I'll be asking about the work that the province has done to understand and mitigate the fiscal situation facing municipalities, especially given that they are being required to still remit full taxes to BC Transit and TransLink despite depressed revenues. We need to be sure that extending the school tax and police tax deadline will be enough to ensure that they remain on firm financial footing. This bill also amends the Balanced Budget and Ministerial Accountability Act to temporarily suspend the prohibition against deficit budgets for the next 3 years, enabling the government to pass deficit budgets to the legislature for the 2021-22, 22-23, and 23-24 fiscal years. As the fiscal update showed last week, we, like every jurisdiction dealing with COVID around the world, are facing a very challenging fiscal situation. There is a consensus amongst economists and public policy experts of all political stripes that substantial government investment and intervention is required to support people and to boost our economy in this highly uncertain time. Of course, the government needs to continue to responsibly manage expenditures, but fear-mongering about deficits is not helpful. Running deficits is not inherently irresponsible or problematic. What matters is not the deficit itself, but the size of the debt relative to the strength of the economy, as well as the cost of borrowing. The cost of borrowing is extremely low right now, and as we went into this crisis, on strong financial footing. At this moment in time, it would be, frankly, irresponsible to not run a substantial deficit to support people and keep the economy moving. But unfortunately, as the opposition can attest, fear-mongering about deficits seems to be good politics. Requiring a balanced budget each year is a purely political act that doesn't support good policy outcomes. It makes longer-term planning and programming more difficult and results in artificial constraints and inefficient spending in ministries. So while I fully support the fact that this bill allows for deficits for the next 3 years as we seek to recover from COVID-19, I question the reluctance of this government to challenge this paradigm. Government should not have to change legislation to be able to run a deficit when it's the responsible thing to do. This brings me to my major concern about the bill, not what it changes, but what it doesn't change. This bill continues to reinforce the political frame that government is not to be trusted and that its role is to be minimized, despite the fact that this most recent crisis is showing us that precisely the opposite is true. Despite allowing budget deficits for the next 3 years, this bill does not change the salary holdbacks under this legislation that were introduced by the previous government. These holdbacks mean that ministers are penalized 10% of their salary for not balancing their individual portfolios, and another 10% when the government budget as a whole is not balanced, for a 20% penalty. This means ministers are essentially being penalized for authorizing the social supports, economic investments, and programs required to get BC through this crisis. So the Minister of Health, to take one example, oversaw a health response to COVID-19 to keep our healthcare system functioning and to keep British Columbians safe. The minister has implemented widespread testing, extra surge capacity for our hospitals, PPE for our healthcare workers, and a surgical renewal plan, all of which cost substantial money, and all of which are absolutely required to help us weather this crisis. And because of this, the minister is facing a 20% salary penalty this year. That doesn't seem right. This is true for every minister and every portfolio affected by COVID-19. This isn't about individual ministers and how hard they've been working or their individual decisions. This is about the signal we're sending about the role of government leadership and the discretion of elected politicians to make decisions supported by evidence and by experts in the public service. The proper place for ministers to be held accountable for these decisions is in the legislature and ultimately by the people of BC during elections. It's not by a punitive financial penalty that isn't responsive to the actual context we are in today. This type of legislation reflects the damaging notion that government is not to be trusted, despite the fact that this pandemic has shown us more clearly than ever the need for responsible government leadership to support the health and well-being of the people of British Columbia. So I'm sad to see that this government has chosen to leave this in place. Mr. Speaker, I will be speaking to this issue further at committee stage, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.